تعالى وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت عليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. فقد نوينا تعلم التعليم وتذكر التذكير ونفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة نبيه والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على خير وكل ما نواه مشايخنا ابتغاء وجه الله وثوابه وقربه. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. Alhamdulillah. In our discussions on Al-Ajurrumiyya, intermediate Arabic primer, we have entered into the second lesson, and we're going to talking about literally the most important chapter, because everything in grammar relates back to this one issue. And if you're nerdy like myself, right, it would be really good if you could chart it. If you can make a chart. There are some charts provided on the slides, but the more that we can make a mental map in our minds, right, and be able to express it and explain each components, the more that we'll have a wider and more encompassing understanding of the Arabic grammar. The things that don't fall under this, the chart starting from this point, would most likely have to do with a separate science which is called morphology. We're going to try to squeeze in some basics of morphology throughout the course, but the focus should be on this specific chapter and what it branches out to be. And from here till the last class of this term, we're going to be expounding on pretty much this one issue. And that's how deep the grammar goes. Last week, alhamdulillah, we discussed the basics of what is speech, what is Arabic speech, and it breaking down into nouns, verbs, and particles. Right? All of them, each of them having their own signs, right? And each of them having their own types. We didn't go into too much detail about the types of nouns, because the types of nouns is more theoretical than it is practical. However, it does have practical implications. Just to put it out there, just so that we don't have holes, right? There are essentially three types of nouns. Essentially, there are three types of nouns: jamid, masdar, and mushtaq. The first one, jamid. Jamid is there's a really cool English word for it, but I don't recall it. I remember not liking it at first, so it'll come back inshallah. Jamid literally in Arabic means frozen. Right, so you can say, like, where is the ice cream? Huwa jamid, right? Or muthallaj. Right? But jamid is a word which is not derived from another word, nor are any words derived from it. It is not derived from any other word, nor are any other words derived from it. Right. Right. So it is not the source of other words, nor does it come from a different source. So words like ash-shajara, tree, right? Faras, horse, bint, girl. Right? These words are not derivative words. They're not derived words, nor are they words that other words are derived from. Like, for instance, you have the word shukr. Anyone know what shukr means? Gratitude. Good. Right. So shukr is a root word. Right. Shukr, you can call it a verbal noun or a root noun. Right. But shukr is a type of word that you can derive other words from it. So mashkur is the thing that is being appreciated. Right. Shakir is a person who's showing gratitude. So you have derivative words from that one word. So jamid is not like that. It's neither like shukr nor is it like shakir. Right? It's not derived from anything, nor is anything derived from it. And there are many examples: faras, horse, bint, girl, and so forth. Right? The second type is that root noun, a verbal noun or a root noun. Right? It's a noun. It doesn't show any tense. However, it does portray an action. Right? And we have this in the equivalent in English as well. Like for instance, when I say, I love sleeping. Right? Sleeping is a noun in this sentence, right? It's the object. Right? It's a noun, so it doesn't have a tense. Right? If I said, I am sleeping, that's different, right? Because I would use the verb to add the tense. Right? But sleep, I love sleeping, it's a noun, but it does show an action. It does show an action. So the root, the verbal noun or the root noun, right? The masdar in Arabic, it shows an action, but it does not show a tense. So it is a noun. Right? So I said shukrun with a tanween. That's a sign of a noun. Right? Gratitude. Right? I could make it into a verb, ashkuru, shakara, right? But then that would be something derived from that word. So the second type is that root word, that verbal noun, right? Which other things are derived from it. Right? So you'll see this right, in Qur'an, you'll see this even in our text right now, like the first screen, matan. Right? Matan is a root noun. Right? The next screen as well, i'rab is a root noun. Right? Inflection. Right? You can derive something from it, like a word that's mu'rab, right? A word that allows for an inflection. Right? And then the third, obviously, is the word that is derived from that root word. Right? So shukr, gratitude, root noun, right? Or verbal noun. Shakir, the grateful one, the person who's grateful, right, is a derivative word. Right? So we didn't mention that in the previous class because the text doesn't mention it, but it's good to know. Because in future lessons, we will refer to this, and we'll try to point it out as they come. We talked about the types of verbs, and the types of verbs pretty much break down into three. You have the past tense, right? The mudari'. So the past tense is maldi, the maldi. Right? The present tense is the mudari'. Mudari' also has a future tense within it. It's one or the other. Right? So ashkuru, I am being grateful, or I will be grateful. Right? So that mudari' contains both present and past, present and future. And then last you have the command, ushkur. Right? Ushkur rabbak, be grateful to your Lord. It's a command. Right? فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُونِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. Remember me and I will remember you, and be grateful to me and do not be ingrateful. Right? So, and then the particle, the harf, the third type of word, we didn't mention it, but there are two types of harf. They're the causative particles. The causative particles are those particles which affect the inflection or the voweling of the word after it. Right? Like for instance, alhamdu li, lillah, he, kasra. Right? So that li caused the next word to have a kasra. Right? So some particles, they affect the word after it. Right? In voweling, in the vowel. Right? So if I said, هذا الكتاب لي زيد. Right? This book is for Zayd. Right? Is Zayd's. Li Zaydin with a kasra. So that lam is one of the many types of causative huruf, particles. There are also particles that don't affect anything. They only add to the meaning, like wow. Right? Wow meaning and. Right? So I said Zayd entered. Zayd and Amr entered the room. Right? Dakhala Zaydun wa Amrun wa Ahmadun, however many, it doesn't change the i'rab. So that has its own chapter, but I wanted to just get that out of the way before we start into this, because we need to understand the three types before entering into this. Right, so today's class we're going to be focusing on inflection, right? Al-I'rab. And i'rab comes from what? Anyone can pick out the root letters? What are the three most important letters in that word? If you look on the screen, Al-I'rab. What are the three most important letters? Ayn, Ra, and Ba. Right? What other word can you think of that has Ayn, Ra, and Ba in it? Arab. Right? Arab. Arab, right? Like, right? Arabiyya is Arabic. هذا القرآن عربي مبين. This is a clear Arabic Qur'an. Right? You have the word Arabic. The Arabs, right, with no bias implied, those who spoke Arabic, right, and spoke eloquently, they called them Arabs. Arab, right, Arabs. Right. Those who did not speak Arabic or spoke bad Arabic, they called them Ajam. Ajam in Arabic technically means dumb. Right? Someone who's unable to eloquently express themselves. Right? No offense to us. We're all Ajam. Anyone Arab here? Anyone eloquent? Right. But so I'rab, right? A'rabtuhu means to make something clear. Right? I'rab means to make something clear. Not to be confused with A'rab with a fatha. And this one's I'rab with a kasra. A'rab means Bedouins. وَقَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. In the Quran, so the Bedouins say that we believe. So I'rab means to express yourself and to make something clear. But the I'rab that we're talking about, in the jargon of the grammarians, right, he defines it here. He says, قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى الإعراب هو تغيير أواخر الكلم لاختلاف العوامل الداخلة عليها لفظا أو تقديرا. In English, inflection is the changing of vowel markings at the end of words according to a variance in governing agents, whether they are explicit or implicitly inferred. It's a long technical definition. It makes more sense if we give examples. Right, so the most important part, there's a change in the vowel markings at the ending of a word. And the reason for that change depends on what caused it to change, the governing agent. Right? We just gave an example, alhamdulillahi. Right? The governing agent here is that harf, is that particle, that a causative particle, right? That had that not been there, the voweling on the end of that last word would not have been changed to a kasra. Right? So, depending on what role a word plays in a sentence, it's going to change the voweling on the end of it. Right, so you may see in some situations, right, qala Allahu. Right, here it's alhamdulillahi. Right. So why the change? Right, because of its role in the sentence. Right, depending on its role, so you can understand that the i'rab changes according to its role. Right, according to its role in the sentence and according to whatever words are before it that change it, that cause it to change. So, the opposite of inflection are words that have fixed endings. They never change. They're called al-mabni or bina. Right? Bina is actually the same word for a building, a structure, an edifice, right? Something that does not move. Right? So example, men. What does men mean? Opposite of woman? No. Men, what does men mean? Anyone? That's min. Who, right? Men and min both are, their endings are stuck. Right? They will never change. You'll never say manu or mani or mana. Right? It's just men. No matter where you put it in the sentence. Even if I put a li in front of it, li men, for who? Right? To whom does this belong? You would say li man hadha. Right? For who is this? Right? So those words don't change. Right? So later on, you'll see that the words break up into two types. Words that change on their ending, they're called mu'rab, same word. Right? It's a derivative of this word. I'rab is inflection. Mu'rab is a word that accepts change in the inflection. And then there's other words that are mabni, that don't change. And we mentioned, right, all of the huruf, all of the particles are mabni. Right, they'll never change. Right. When we get to the chapter, we'll mention all of that, all past tense verbs, all, right. Right, but he says, according to the governing agent, right, according to the variance in governing agents, whether it is explicit or implicit, right, explicit or implicitly inferred. Right, so sometimes the change, right, is what they call lafdhan. Lafdhan, it's explicit. You can see it there. Lillahi, you can see the kasra clear as day. Right, so there's some that are visible. Right, but there's others that are implied. They're implicit. And that's usually due to some sort of preventative factor that stops you from being able to see that kasra or that fatha or that dhamma. Right. Now we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in the upcoming slides, but there are basically three things that prevent a word from having a clear fatha or a clear dhamma or a clear kasra. Right. One of them is called a ta'addur. There's no word to put it. Like for instance, the word Musa. Who's Musa? Yeah, Moses, right? Prophet Moses. Right, so Musa, if I could write it for you, it would be good. Right? Mim, waw, sin, and then there's the ya with the little alif on it, the kari zabar, right? The standing alif. Right? There's nowhere to put. You can't put a dhamma on an alif. You can put a dhamma on the hamza, but you can't put a dhamma on the alif. So Musa, right? If I said li Musa, where's the kasra? Right? So the kasra is implied because it comes after li. Anything that comes after li, right, is going to be what they call makhfud, khafid. Khafid. We'll talk about the types in the next moment. Right? But there's supposed to be a kasra there, but there's nowhere to put it. You can't say li Musi. That's not his name. Right? You're going to change his name. You can't do that. Right? So that's one reason that there's nowhere to put it. And there's a lot of prophets' names are like that. Like li Yahya, right? John, the Baptist, right? Yahya. Right? Or li Zakariya if you're reading Hafs. Right? In Warsh, Zakariya with a hamza. You would see li Zakariya. Right? But the more famous reading is Zakariya with an alif in the end, and there's nowhere to put the kasra. Right? The second is that it's difficult to put a kasra, or there's difficult to put a vowel. Right? It's possible, but it's just not easy to read. And Arabs love their fluidity. They love the smoothness of their speech. Right? And if you study the eloquence, balagha, one of the criteria is that it has to be adiba, salis al-kalam. That the speech has to be fluent. Right? It has to flow. Right? So, like for instance, the vowel yad'u. Anybody know what yad'u means? To call, right? Dua or da'wah means to call. Right? Yad'u is actually yad'u. But it's really hard to say that. Right? You might not have your wudu for very long if you try to say yad'u 100 times too fast. Right? Yad'u. Right? Or if you were to say yarmiyu. Right? So in those situations, they would just say yad'u. So much easier. Yad'u. Right? So it's supposed to be a vowel change on the end, but they omitted it because it's too difficult to say. Right? And then the last one, right, is because generally, if you say that my book or my car or my house, how do you say? How do anyone know how to say my book? Kitabi. What if I said ra'aytu kitabi? I saw my book. Right? Then object is supposed to have a fatha. So I said, for instance, ra'aytu al-kitaba. I saw the book. Ra'aytu al-kitaba. I saw the book. Right? But if I make it my book, I can't say رأيت كتابي. Right? I can't say the fatha and still have the ya at the end. Right? It's not appropriate for the word, so they just omit the fatha, kitabi. Right? And you would know from the context that this word is an object, therefore it's in the state of nasab. Right? Nasab is the state that would generally be signified by fatha. Right? So either it's directly mentioned, right? Either the voweling at the end of the word is directly mentioned, right? And it's explicit and you can see it, right? Or it's implied and inferred by the context of the sentence, right? And by understanding, right, the sentence right, more so if you have the stronger the vocabulary becomes, you'll be able to automatically point out that this word, right, is an object even though there's no dhamma, or even though there's no fatha or no kasra, right, because of the context. So if I said ra'aytu Musa, I saw Musa, right, if you know the rule that all objects are nasab, generally signified by fatha, right, like ra'aytul kitab, right, then you wouldn't need to see the fatha on the end of Musa because you would know it's an object, therefore it's nasab. Right. Or if I said هذا الكتاب, this book, li Musa, is for Musa, you would know. There's supposed to be a kasra, but you can't put the kasra. Right? So it's in the state of khafd, right? Even though, right, it's implied, right, by the context. Right? Following. Right? So the three types, or four actually, of inflection, and this is where the chart starts to begin. I'rab, four types. Right? There's rafa', right? And at first, I mean, it might be good to have, right, some sort of method of memorizing the terms, but the more that we can replace our translations of the terms with the actual terms themselves and just adopt the jargon instead of being reluctantly not using it, the more that we can just adopt it, the more keys we have to opening further books and more understanding of the text. So it's best that we just say rafa' instead of, right? It's a lot easier also to say, right, than saying an inflection, right, which is generally signified by a fatha or by a dhamma or something that substitutes it. Right? It's much easier for me, but it will be easier for you as well in the future. Right, so the first type is rafa'. Rafa' linguistically means to raise something. Right? But rafa' in the terminology of the grammarians, may Allah be pleased with them, right, it's a type of inflection, which is signified by a dhamma or its substitute. Signified by a dhamma or its substitute. Right? And as we mentioned, that dhamma can either be explicit or implicit. Right? Like, qala Musa. Musa said. Right? It's supposed to be a dhamma. Right? If I use the normal word, qala Zaydun. Right? But because Musa, right, doesn't accept any changes on the end of it, because there's nowhere to put it, right, it's implied. So rafa' signified by a dhamma or its substitute. We'll talk about its substitutes in a moment. Nasab, are those the printouts? Are they from today? Yep. From last week? Did everyone get today's?
Yeah.
Yeah, so to save you some time, there should be, at the end, vocab already printed out for you. Tell me if it's not. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so the rafa', the nasab, the jazm, the khafd, all of it's there. Okay. I printed that small list, just the basic terms that we're going to be using for today, but also to show how you should arrange your notes, right? How you should take notes. So there's the singular and the plural wherever it applies, right? And we'll talk about verbs in the future. All the sisters good? Okay. All right, so rafa' signified by a dhamma or its substitute. We'll talk about that in a second. Nasab, right, is signified by a fatha or its substitute. Right? As we just mentioned, one of the types of words that falls under nasab are objects. Right? All objects are mansub. Right? Mansub, the word that's in the state of nasab. Right? So rafa, right, is a change, is a type of inflection. The word that is changed, right, and comes into the state of being rafa is called marfu'. 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 Right? And again, these are all derivative words. So rafa is a root noun. Marfu' is derived from it. It's the word that is in the state of rafa. So nasab is a type of inflection which is signified by a fatha, right, or its substitute, and the word that is in that state is called mansub. Right? Mansub. Likewise, khafd is signified by a kasra or its substitute, and the word that is in the state of khafd is makhfud. Right? Some of you who have studied previously may know it to be majroor. Right? The type of inflection is called jar, right? And the word is called majroor. They mean exactly the same thing. And then the last one is jazm. And jazm is signified by a sukun, right, or a sakin, or its substitutes, and that word is called majzoom. Right, so if I just sneak peek real quick. Right, so the first two, rafa and nasab, right, they are shared by nouns and verbs. So a noun can be rafa, a verb can be rafa. A noun can be, or you can say a noun can be marfu', a verb can be marfu', a noun can be mansub, and a verb can be mansub. Right, so we already gave example. Ra'aytu al-kitaba. Al-kitaba. What is al-kitab, a verb or a noun? Noun. What's the sign that it's a noun? The alif lam, right? Right, so al-kitaba is mansub. Right? It's in the state of nasab, signified by a fatha, right, in this case. Right? Dakhala zaydun. Dakhala zaydun. Zaydun here is the doer of the verb. Dakhala, Zayd entered. The doer is always marfu'. The doer is always marfu'. Right, so those are nouns. Zaydun, al-kitaba. Right, they're both marfu'. But you can also have verbs as well. If I said yadkhulu Zaydun, yadkhulu. Right, that Dhamma on the end, that means that yadkhulu is a verb, mudari', it's present tense, and it's marfu'. Right. You can also have a verb, and that's the default. Whenever you see a verb, the default is that it's marfu', right? That it's going to end in a dhamma or its substitutes. However, there are certain words that if you add them prior to the verb, right, they will change the verb from being marfu' to being mansub. Right? Those are the governing agents. Right? Those are the words that enter and cause the verb to be mansub, like lan. Right? Lan means never. So I said Zayd will never enter. Lan yadkhula Zaydun. Lan yadkhula. So lan yadkhula is, right, fi'al, verb, mudari', present tense, mansub. Right? Because, and the sign that it's mansub is that it has a fatha on the end of the word. So we'll be doing more and more of this. Right? As they say, practice makes permanent. Right? Khafd, on the other hand, is only for nouns. Right? You're not going to see yadkhuli. Right? You won't say yadkhuli. Right? Only nouns can have khafd. Right? So we already said lillahi. Right? Hada li Musa. Musa is makhfud. We just can't see it because it's implied because of the reason we talked about. Right? Or li kitabi. Right? هذا القلم لكتابي. This pen is for my book. Right? Li, anything after li is going to be مخفوض. Okay? But that's only for nouns. That's only for nouns. Right? There is a type of, there's a few words that enter onto verbs that are similar to the li of verbs, but it's not the same meaning. Right? ليفعل is not the same meaning as li, the other li. All right, and then the last one, jazm, is only for verbs. So this chart is beneficial. Right? Jazm is only for verbs. If I said lam in front of a mudari' verb, a present tense verb, I put lam, right? Lam yadkhul, the sukun. Right? And lam gives the mudari' a past tense translation. Lam yadkhul, he never entered. Even though mudari' without the lam would be present tense. Lam yakuni alladhina kafaru. Right? Lam yakun. Right? It was never. Okay, tamam. So we kind of skipped forward. It's not a murder mystery, so you can do that. So today we're going to be focused on rafa. Right, so we're going to take one at a time instead of just like piling on a mountain of terms, and we're having a bit of mercy that wasn't shown to us when we were studying this. But it's good to pace oneself, especially with a lot of new terms. So the author, he says, فَلِلْأَسْمَاءِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الرَّفْعُ وَالنَّصَبُ وَالْخَفْضُ. And those related, amongst those inflections, those related to the nouns are rafa', nasab, and khafd, as we showed. Right? Khafd is only for nouns. Rafa' and nasab are shared between nouns and verbs. Right? وَلَا جَزْمَ فِيهَا. There is no jazm, there is no majzoom for nouns. Jazm being sukun, anything that's signified by a sukun or its substitute. Right. وَلِلْأَفْعَالِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الرَّفْعُ وَالنَّصَبُ وَالْجَزْمُ وَلَا خَفْضَ فِيهَا. And for the verbs, they have rafa', dhamma or its substitute, nasab, fatha or its substitute, right? Jazm, sukun or its substitute, but no khafd. There's no, right? وَلَا خَفْضَ فِيهَا. There is no khafd for it or in it. Right. So you can see even in the Arabic, فَلِي لِي الْأَسْمَاءِ فَلِي الْأَسْمَاءِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. Right, min dhalika ar-raf'u. So even the book itself, right, one could technically just apply all the rules to it, right, and be able to grammatically do what they call i'rab of it, right, that you can analyze it through the rules of grammar. So, everyone understand this so far? Any questions before we move on? Right. So there's 4 inflections, right? Rafa', nasab, right? Khafd, and jazm. Right? We'll become more familiar with them throughout the week because you already have them on the vocab. Try to memorize them, right, as best as possible. But today we're focusing on rafa'. Right? Rafa' signified by a dhamma. Right? We already took this. So rafa' is signified by the dhamma or its substitute. Tam. Allahu Akbar. Tamam. So he says لِلرَّفْعِ. Again, لِلرَّفْعِ. The li caused ar-rafa'. So in this sentence, here's a tricky question. لِلرَّفْعِ. The word rafa' here is what state? What type of inflection? It's khafd. Good. Rafa' is khafd, if that's not confusing. لِلرَّفْعِ. Right, in the sentence. So for rafa', right, arba'u alamats. There are 4 signs, if you want to literally translate it. لِلرَّفْعِ arba'u alamatin. So there are 4 signs of rafa'. The first one is the base, is the fundamental sign, which is dhamma. Default, it's going to be dhamma unless there's a reason, right, otherwise. Right? Special types of words may not be able to take the Dhamma, so it will be implied. Other types of words, they use the substitutes of Dhamma, right, which are the next three, which is the waw. Right, we'll give examples for each. The alif and the noon. Right, so Dhamma is the main sign. The waw, the alif, and the noon are substitutes. Right, you don't have the substitute if the main one is there. Tamam. So if we were to, I wonder if we can use the board and the slides. MashaAllah. That would be beneficial. There's no way to put the screen on there, right? On here? Probably not. I don't want to risk it. Well, I think maybe next time we can use the board also. Yeah, but will it show up on there without disturbing this? Okay, let's get through this first. Maybe next week we'll aim for that. Okay, so an example of Dhamma, right? We already did. Dakhala. Dakhala means, right, to enter, right? Dakhala Zaydun. Dakhala Zaydun. If you have a verb and then the next word, right, this is a general statement, just to as a kind of a helper. And the next word is in rafa, is marfu'. Generally, that word is going to be the doer of that verb. Right? Qala Zaydun. Zayd said. Right? What is the word that we used earlier? Shukr. What does shukr mean? It's the company where you buy your hats. What's it called? Gratitude. Right? So if I made shukr into a verb, right? Shakara Zaydun. How would you translate it? Zaydun. With the Dhamma means Zayd is the doer. Was grateful. Good. You were careful to make, because shakara is past tense. If I said yashkuru Zaydun, how would you translate it? Zayd is grateful. Good. Right. So Zayd is the doer. Whenever you see the doer of a verb, right, that is going to be marfu'. Right? But because Zayd is a normal word, you're going to actually see the Dhamma there. Zaydun. Dakhala Zaydun. If I said Dakhala Musa, it means exactly, or Shakara Musa, it means the same thing. You just won't see the Dhamma. Right? But that's a normal word. So the basis is that it's going to be a Dhamma. Right? But if the word is a special type of word, it'll show up by a waw, for instance. Like one type of word is called the unbroken masculine plural. The unbroken masculine plural. And we'll mention what that means. Right? Like for instance, the word shakir, shakirun, right, is a grateful person. Shakirun, a grateful person. What is the order of the letters in shakir? Just spell it out in your mind. What is the order? Or not in your mind, out loud. Sheen. Shakir. Sheen, alif, kaf, ra. Okay, if I wanted to make it plural, all I would have to do is add waw noon at the end. Shakiruna. Shakirun. Right? So the unbroken masculine plural is a masculine word, right? Where the sequence of its singular is not broken when you make it into a plural. Right? So this type of word you just add to the end. Shakir becomes shakirun. Still sheen, alif, kaf, ra. But now we just added waw noon. Right? Same thing. Muslim, muslimun. Right? Mu'min, mu'minun. Right? So those kind of words, how would you know that it's marfu'? Right? By un. Un, waw, noon. Right? So here he says the substitute of Dhamma is a waw. So I said, shakara ash-shakirun. How would you translate that? Shakara ash-shakirun. The grateful ones were grateful. Good. It's kind of cool. Right, there's a verse in the Quran. Sa'ala sa'ilun بعذاب واقع. Right, so شكر الشاكرون, the grateful ones were grateful. Who's the doer of the gratitude here? The grateful. Shakirun. Because all doers are marfu'. But in this case, we can tell that it's marfu' because of the waw, not because of a dhamma. Right? Because it's shakiruna. We ignore that last letter because this type of word, you can't tell by the vowel, you only tell by the letter. Right? If it's waw noon, it's marfu'. If it's ya noon, it's mansub. Shakirin, mu'minin, muslimin. Right? Allahumma ighfir li wa lil muslimin. Right? Lil muslimin. Ra'aytu al muslimin. Right? So if you ever see a unbroken masculine plural with a waw noon, you know it's marfu'. Right? Al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minatu. Right? In the Qur'an, al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat. Muttaqun, mu'minun, sabirun. Any word that ends in una, that is marfu'. The sign is the waw that comes prior to the noon. When we get to nasab, you'll see shakirin, right? Shakirin, not not shakirun, shakirin. Right, the second one is alif. Right, the second substitute is alif. Right, and alif only shows up when the word is dual. Right, so if you want to make any word, any noun dual in Arabic, right, you would put an alif noon on the end of it, if it's marfu'. So what's the word for book that we were using? Kitab. Right? Now if I put ani at the end, alif, noon with a kasra. Right? Kitabani, 2 books. Right? If I said, right, I saw 2 books, right? Well, in this situation, would the books be the doer or the object? The object. Right? And we mentioned the objects are always mansub. Right, so here you would not see, right, kitabani, because kitabani is marfu'. And objects are not marfu', you would see kitabaini. Ra'aytu kitabaini. I saw 2 books. Right, but if I wanted to, right, make it the doer, I would say wujida al-kitabani. Right, the 2 books were found. Right. Or kharuqa al-kitabani. The books ripped. 2 books. Kitabani, they're the doer of that verb. Right? Or even if it was a nominal sentence, if I said, right, Hadani kitabani, these 2 things are books. Right? These are books. And this is where the English translations don't do much benefit, because generally they wouldn't waste the ink saying that these parentheses 2 things are parentheses 2 books. They would just say these are books, and you wouldn't know what they're talking about, right? How many specifically. One beautiful verse in Surah Taha, he says, وَقَالُوا إِنَّ هَذَانِ لَسَاحِرَانِ يُرِيدَانِ أَنْ يُخْرِجَاكُمْ مِنْ أَرْضِكُمْ بِسِحْرِهِمَا وَيَذْهَبَا بِطَرِيقَتِكُمُ الْمُثْلَى. It's all dual. Right? In هَذَانِ, these 2, verily these 2 are magicians. Right? Moses and Aaron. Right? The Israelites, they didn't like him at first, right? Before he saved them from Pharaoh. Right? These two are magicians. In hadani sahirani, they're both dual. They're both marfu'. Hadani is marfu'. Right? Sahirani is marfu'. The sign of it being marfu' is what? The alif. Right? Not a dhamma. Good. Right? Not a dhamma. Right? And in this case, not a waw, because it's not plural. Right? It's not an unbroken plural. It's not plural at all. It's dual. Right? So that's the second sign. The last sign has to do with verbs. The last sign has to do with verbs. It would be good if we kind of made a chart of the past tense and present tense verbs, at least just the first form. Right? But present tense, if I were to just read it to you, right, using the word shakara, yashkuru, yashkurani, yashkuruna, tashkuru, tashkurani, yashkurna, tashkuru, tashkurani, tashkuruna, tashkurina, tashkurani, tashkurna, ashkuru, nashkuru. So some of those, you can hear there's a noon on the last letter. Yashkuruna. Right? You hear it in the Qur'an. Yu'minuna. Right? Yattaquna. Yasbiruna. Right? That noon on the end, if it remains and does not drop off, right, that means it's marfu'. Because if you were to add certain letters to it, that would change it from being marfu' to something else, right, the noon would fall off. Right? If it was plural or dual, the noon would fall off. Right? Except for the feminine plural, which remains. Right? Just to give an example, just so this point is explained properly, we already mentioned one type of word, one harf, that if you put it in front of a verb, it makes it mansub. Anyone remember? Caught that? Len. Right? Len. Right, so len means never. Right, so if you want to say Zayd is not grateful, you would say la yashkuru Zaydun. Zayd does not show gratitude. Right? Present tense. But if you want to say Zayd will never be grateful, len yashkura Zaydun. The last letter has a fatha. It's mansub. Right? Had the word yashkuru been plural, like for instance, they will never be grateful. Right? Originally, they are grateful is yashkuruna. Yashkuruna. It's a plural. Right? If I put len on that noon will fall off. Len yashkuru. Right? The fact that noon is not there is a sign that it's not marfu'. If the noon is there, that means it's marfu'. So if I say yashkuruna, it's marfu'. If I say yashkuru, right, with a waw at the end, but no noon, the noon fell off, automatically you know that it's definitely not marfu'. Then you move on to the next few categories. Right? Does it apply to them? And that's just one. Len is one of them. Len causes the verb to change from being marfu' to being mansub. Right? So there are certain words, like we mentioned the causative particles, that if you put them in front of a verb, it will change the verb to being something else. Right? Some of them cause the verb to be mansub. Some of them cause the verb to be majzoom. Right? There's no khafad for verbs. Right? If you were to put them in front of a noun, it may cause change the noun from being marfu', which is the default, to being mansub. Like ra'aytul kitaba. Right? But there are some particles also that would do that. Inna al-kitaba. Verily the book. Right? Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu. Right? So we'll be taking that. Right? So some words cause the next word to be mansub. Some cause it to be majzoom, and so forth. Right? So Dhamma, if you'll see it clear as day, or it'll be implied by this sentence. Right? The waw is for the unbroken, not bloken, even though it's for blokes. Right? It's masculine, plural, masculine. Right? The waw, right, is for the unbroken masculine plural. The alif is for the dual, right? And dual is only for nouns. Dual and plural only applies to nouns. Right? Someone might have an objection. And what about plural verbs? Yashkuruna, you just said it yourself. Yashkuruna, they are grateful. Right? What is plural in the sentence? Is the action plural, or is the doer plural? Doer. Is the doer a verb or a noun? No. Noun. Right. So only nouns can be dual or plural. Right. Verbs are just actions. It wasn't two gratitudes that happened, or three gratitudes. Right? They is a change in the pronoun that's within the verb. Right. So, and then the noon remaining on the end of a mudari' verb, right, is a sign that verb is unchanged. It's the default. Right, so you can consider that all verbs are marfu' until proven otherwise. So any questions on that? Because we're going to hone it in a little more, right? Because now we're only going to talk about the Dhamma. So you can see how big this chart can become. Right, so you have rafa', nasab, khafad, jazam. Rafa' has 4 4 signs: Dhamma, Waw, Alif, and the Noon remaining. Right? And now we're just talking about Dhamma. It gets into a big tree. Start a chart now, write really small at the top of a really big paper, and it'll be really nice at the end. I can for the Noon, the plural, or the 5 what they're called, the 5 verbs. The dual mudari', third person, right? The plural mudari', we'll be doing it soon in the next slide. So, right? But it's the noon that remains on the end of the plural and dual verbs. Right? Had it been mansub or majzoom, that noon would have fallen off. Right? So the fact that the noon remains is a sign that it's marfu'. So if you see in the Quran, yu'minuna bil ghaib, they believe in the unseen. Right? Yu'minuna, that noon is still remaining there, is a sign that that word is untouched. Right? There's no letter changing it from being its default marfu'. The waw is a sign only for the unbroken masculine plural, which is a noun. Right? Which is a noun. So the final sign is only for verbs. The other 3 are only for nouns, except for the first one in singular nouns, yaktubu. Yaktubu is a dhamma, but that's for singular verbs. All right, so we're going to jump into the dhamma now. Sorry?
Waw is only for nouns.
This waw is for nouns, yes. Right, plural, masculine, nouns. Any other questions? Tamam. Okay, so now we're honing in one more, right? A couple more degrees of zoom, right? The Dhamma, right? And we're going to focus on the Dhamma a bit first, right? Because the Dhamma, as we said, is the default. It's the default, right? The other 3 are merely its substitutes, right? When the Dhamma is not possible, right? So he says, فَأَمَّا الضَّمَّةِ, as for the Dhamma, right, فَتَكُونُ عَلَامَةٍ لِلرَّفْعِ في أربعة مواضع في الاسم المفرد. Right, it is a sign of rafa' in 4 instances. So 4 types of words. You'll see the Dhamma clear as day, right there, right in front of you. Right, either you'll see it written as a Dhamma, or you'll see it implied, like in the case of Musa. Right. Alayhi salam. Right, so the first type of word that would take a dhamma, either explicitly mentioned or implicitly implied, right, is al-ism al-mufrad. And on your vocab lists, right, the mufrad is a singular word. Its plural is mufradat, right, singular words. Al-ism is noun. Right. I added there also its linguistic meaning, which is name. Right. The plural of ism is asma. Right, so al-ismu al-mufrad is the singular noun. Right, it's a descriptive phrase. Al-ismu al-mufrad. The singular noun. The singular noun is that word, sorry to mention the obvious, which is that word which is not dual or plural. Right? Right, and it is not amongst the famous 5 nouns. And they're coming in the future slide. There are a few nouns that they're just the exception to the rule, right? Abuka, fuka, hamuka, right? And they all sound like that. And dhul mal, right? They're coming, right? Just because of the nature of the root word, right? They change by letter, not by vowel. Right? So just notes that the singular noun that's referred to here is the word that's not dual or plural, and it's not one of the 5 famous nouns. The 5 famous nouns are coming in the next few. They're coming here. Right? Abuka, akhuka, hamuka, fuka, and dhumal. Right, so just to scare you for a little bit. Another chart coming. All right, the second place where a Dhamma would apply is the Jam'u Taksir, the broken plural. Now we just mentioned the unbroken plural. Anyone catch the rule, the definition of that? Of the unbroken plural? The plural that remains? Yeah. The order of what remains? Yeah, it's if it's singular. If it's singular. Good. Right, so the broken plural would be that its singular is broken up when it's made into a plural. Like a good example, rajulun. Anyone know what rajulun means?
Man.
A man. Right. The plural is rijalun. So ra, jim, lam, singular. Plural, ra, jim, alif, lam. It's broken up. The sequence is broken. So that is a broken plural. Right, so the broken plural, you would say, right, qala rijalun, dhamma. You would see the dhamma there. Right. All right. The example of the unbroken masculine? Muslimuna, Shakiruna, Sabiruna. Right, any word where the singular, the sequence of the singular, right, is still intact when you make it plural. You pretty much just add to the end to make it plural, and you don't break up the sequence. Right, so the broken plural, and for those who took the previous class, right, this is something new for you all as well. The broken plural, right, the sequence can be broken up in a few different ways. Right, one, obviously, a whole letter interjects in there. Right, rajulun becomes rijalun. A whole an alif was added. That's one of the ways, and that's generally the most common way that a letter was added. Right, but it would be considered broken plural as well, right, if the vowel marks change as well. So the word asad, anyone know what asad means? Lion. Right? Anyone know the plural? If I had a gift, I would. Yeah. Close, very close. I think there's multiple plurals, but it's usdun. Usdun. There's a really beautiful book called Ustul Ghaba. It's a biography of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Ustul Ghaba fi ma'rifati as-sahaba. Right? Usdun. Right? The letters are the same, but the vowel marks are completely different. So that would be considered broken, right, technically. Right? So asadun becomes usdun. That's one type. It's much more rare than the one we mentioned. Right? Another would be a letter is dropped off, right? Not added, but dropped. Right? The word tuhma. Tuhma means an accusation. Right? The plural of it is tuham. Right? Tuhmatun has 4 letters. Ta, ha, mim, ta, marbuta. The small ta. Right? Its plural is tuham. Right? And that's considered naqas also. That's a letter was dropped off. Right? And then after that, it will be any combination of the two. Right? Right? A vowel change with an additional letter, a vowel change with a letter dropped off. Right? There's no need to mention all of the possibilities. Right? So, but we'll just read it. Right? An added letter, the word sinwun becomes sinwanun. The vowel marks changing and the word letters dropped off. You have sarir. Anyone know what sarir means? Bed. Right? Bed. The plural is surur. Right? In the Quran, ala sururin mutaqabilin. They will be on couches facing each other. Right? Or sururun marfu'a. Raised couches. Right? Sarirun sururun. Right? A letter was dropped off and the vowels were changed. Right? Sabab, which is the means, right? The plural is asbab. So you have an additional letter and the vowels changed. Right? And then last one would be a combination of all of them. Right? Amir. Anyone know what Amir means? Amir, the leader. Right? The plural is umara'u. Right? It's all kinds of different. So that was just for fa'idah, right? Those are not very common, right? The most common is the ones that we mentioned, right? The adding of a letter and the breaking of the sequence by adding or taking away a letter, not just a vowel. So, but the broken plural is anything that's not a sound unbroken plural. So that's an easier way to kind of encompass everything. Number 3, right, is the unbroken, or some people call it the sound, right? Because salim can mean sound as well. Feminine plural, not the masculine, but the feminine. Right? So the feminine plural is a place of dhamma. Right? The masculine plural, right, is not shown by a dhamma, it's shown by a waw, as we mentioned, right? Muslimuna. Right? That's masculine. Right? The unbroken feminine plural is not shown by a waw, but rather it's shown by the dhamma itself. You'll see that the dhamma. Right? And the unbroken feminine plural, so you have the word mu'mina, which is, right, a female believer. All you would do is add to the end alif ta, mu'minat, right? Salihat, qanitat, tabi'at. Right? So salih is a righteous man. The plural is salihuna, it's masculine, right? Unbroken. Salihatun is a feminine, right, a righteous woman. The plural is salihatun. The alif ta, right, the sequence of its singular is preserved, and the addition is only an alif ta for the feminine, as opposed to a waw noon for the masculine. Right, so salihatun, you'll see the dhamma. Salihatun, right, righteous women. Mu'minatun, believing women. Right, you'll see the dhamma on the end, if it's marfu'. As opposed to the masculine unbroken plural, you won't see a dhamma on the end, you'll just see the waw noon. Muslimuna. Right? If you were to look at vowels, it's muslimuna. That fatha means nothing. Right? Because we're not judging by fatha, we're judging by letters. Is it waw noon or is it ya noon? Right? So this is a pile of information to sift through. Let it sink in over the week. Right. Charts are really beneficial. Okay. Right, so the feminine unbroken plural, there will be an additional alif ta at the end of the word. Alif ta at the end of the word. So if you look in the Qur'an, anywhere that you see, right, a word that ends in alif ta, right, the big ta, not the small ta, right, then that's a feminine unbroken plural. And then the last one is a long title in Arabic. It's al-fi'l al-mudari'. What does fi'l al-mudari' mean? Good.
And future.
Yeah, so mudari' is the present tense / future tense verb. Right, so the mudari' verb, which has nothing attached to its end. Nothing attached to its ending. Right, right, as you conjugate the verbs, you'll see the endings change. Right, in the present tense verb, right, we did it before. Right? Yadkhulu, yadkhulani, yadkhuluna, tadkhulu, tadkhulani, yadkhulna, tadkhulu, tadkhulani, tadkhuluna, tadkhulina, tadkhulani, tadkhulna, adkhulu, nadkhulu. So you see some of them end in a dhamma, some of them end in una, some in ani, right? But that's the default. That's how they are normally. So it's the verb, right? So if you were to sift out of those, the ones that have endings, have specific endings, right? So I don't know. It's tempting to unplug the thing, but it's a lot of work. I'll do this. Actually, can you check if the board is in there? If I just show you real quick. Yeah. See how big this thing writes. Yeah, please. If that's working. It's buried. It's been a long time. So, when I first learned morphology, I thought to myself that when I finish this, I'll never have to write this again. I think I've written it more times since then. Yeah, that one's good. Here, let's switch. You take care of the camera. I have to change the camera. I'll do that.
Right here?
Yeah, I got it. I just need the markers right there on the shelf. Shukran. Oh, good job. Okay, so can everyone see this? Just need to loosen it tightly. This should turn. There we go. Okay.
You're just kind of like this.
Anyone read that? My brain just went blank. Right. So instead of me running off a whole bunch of words, let's write them down. Does anyone know whether they are visual learners or what are the other ones? Some are audible, some are visual.
Kinesthetic.
Yeah, which one is that?
Kinesthetic.
Kinesthetic. Right. Okay, so this is the fi'l mudari' scale. Right. This basically is form 1. Right. There's technically, if you want to get picky about it, there's 14 some odd forms, 10 that are famous. Just get out of your way for a second. Right, so what we're mentioning here is that the fi'l mudari', right, the ones amongst this that don't have anything attached to its ending, right, they're the ones that you can see the Dhamma clearly. So technically, you could just look on here and say which ones have a Dhamma. Right, so shout them out. Which one? We start from here, and then these two. Which ones have a Dhamma? يفعل تفعل. Which one? This one? تفعل again. يفعل and نفعل. See the dhammas on the end? Right. Those are the ones right, that we're discussing here, that there's the fi'l mudari' which has nothing attached to its ending. This is the last root letter. Right? The root letters here are fa, ayn, and lam. Right? Just like the word fi'l. Right? Technically, it means to do. Right? So yaf'alu, he is doing, they are doing, and so forth. Right? So these ones, they have a dhamma. Whereas these other ones, they have alif noon here. You have alif noon, you have waw noon. Right? These are the ones where you're going to tell that it's marfu' by the noon remaining. Because if I were to add a word to it, that would make it into a different state or a different inflection, like len. Len makes words into mansub. They make verbs mansub. So if it's the first one, it'll just change the dhamma to a fatha. Len yaf'ala. Right? Right, so, and that's a sign that now you know that it's not marfu'. Right? Because there's a fatha, there's no dhamma. You're supposed to see a dhamma here. Right? But here you're not supposed to see a dhamma. These few ones here, right? They end in different things. You're not supposed to see the dhamma. Right? So in those cases, well, this one's exception. Right? In these cases, you won't tell because the dhamma changed to a fatha. Rather, you'll tell because the noon dropped off. Right? So the fourth, the marfu' is known by its dhamma or a substitute. The substitute is either the waw noon, muslimun, or the alif, right? Rajulani, the dual, right? Or the noon remaining. This noon being there means that this yaf'alani is marfu'. If I put len on this word, the noon falls off. Len yaf'ala. Right? The fact that there is no noon means it's not marfu'. Right? If the noon remains, it's marfu'. Okay. So, with that, these ones as well. Okay. Is that clear? Anyone have any questions on that? Wait, just 1 second. You can stay on the board. Go ahead, what were you saying? Yeah. Any examples from the Qur'an? Allah says that if you are in doubt about this book, then bring a book like it. Bring a book similar to it. It's a challenge. Right? فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. If they did not do it. Right? If you did not do so. So تَفْعَلُونَ. Is this marfu' or mansub? Or something else? Is it marfu'? تفعلون. Why? Wow is a sign for nouns. Because the noon remains. Good. Right, but right, the verse goes, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. Lam, right, is one of the words that if you put it on a singular, it makes the last letter sukun. Right, we did len just now. Len makes it fatha. Right, lam makes it sukun. Or if it's one of these, the noon falls off. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. Right? Right? If they did not do so, وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا. And then there's len again. Right? And they will never do so. لَن تَفْعَلُوا. Right? Was تَفْعَلُونَ. Noon dropped off because of len. Right? And likewise, noon dropped off because of lam. Exactly. So this one's right, makhfud, khafad, because it's a sukun or it's a substitute. Because if we put it on a singular, you would see the sukun. Right? And this one is mansub. Right? If we had put it on a singular, you would have seen a fatha. So the ones amongst here that don't have anything attached to the end, like an alif noon, right? Yaf'alani, right? Or a waw noon, yaf'aluna. Right, or a ya noon, taf'alina, anti, you are doing, you one woman are doing, taf'alina, right, or taf'alani, the alif noon, the ya noon, right, all of those, right, excluding those ones, right? You'll see the actual Dhamma clearly if it's marfu'. Right, so like, right, this was, if we took out the lam, yaf'alu, right? Here, taf'alu. This would be taf'alu if we took out the lam, right? Af'alu, naf'alu. That's the defaults. You would see the Dhamma. Right, so if we were to summarize the places where you'll actually see the Dhamma itself, not the substitute, but the Dhamma itself, it would be any singular noun, right? A singular noun that, right, except for the 5 nouns that we're going to talk about, right? A broken plural, so that excludes the unbroken masculine plural. Right? The unbroken feminine plural, muslimatun, right? You would see a Dhamma. Right? And then a verb that does not have anything added to its ending. Right? So the defaults, the yaf'alu, the taf'alu, the af'alu, the naf'alu. Right,
What about the yaf'alna and the taf'alna?
yeah, so that's an addition to its ending. So there's 2 of them that end just in a noon itself. Yaf'alna, this one. And there's a likewise on the other side, right across from it, taf'alna. That's the noon of feminine. Right? That's either they 3 or more women or you 3 or more women. Right? That noon stays. That noon, you won't be able to see it being marfu' by a Dhamma. Right? That one you just have to tell by context. Right? And that noon never falls off. It's stuck. Right? The other ones fall off. They just blow in the wind and they fall off. Put a lam or a len, and they just run away. Right? But on that one, it stays. Right? Because,
It's also considered a noon of rafa.
sorry,
It's also considered a noon of rafa.
what was that last?
You had in which place is a noon a sign of rafa? Is it also
Oh, no, not that noon. So this is the noon of feminine. It just stays no matter what the state is. So if I put a len in front of it, it will be len yaf'alna. It won't fall off. Right, only the ones that will fall off, the ones that after an alif or a waw, ani or una. Those are the only 2 exceptions. They won't fall off ever. They're mabani. They're the ones that never change. So that's the Dhamma. Right? What was the first substitute for the Dhamma? Anyone remember? The waw. Good. Right, the waw. Right, so now we already talked about the unbroken masculine plural, that the waw is the sign that you're looking for to tell whether it's marfu' or not. Right? You won't be looking for a Dhamma. You won't say muslimuna. Okay, ends in a fatha. No. Right? Why? You would be saying muslimuna. There's a waw noon. Unbroken masculine plural. I'm looking for wows. Wows. Then it's marfu'. No waw. It's not marfu'. Right? But there's one other word that is also categorized as being marfu' because of a waw, which is the 5 nouns that we excluded previously from the singular nouns. Right? We said, except for the 5 nouns, the 5 famous nouns, because you don't see a Dhamma, you'll tell by a waw, right, for those ones. So just to read the text, as for the waw, it is a sign of rafa' in 2 places, in the unbroken masculine plural, and 2 in the 5 nouns, which are abuka, akhuka, hamuka, fuka, and dhu mal. Abuka means your father. Akhuka means your brother. Hamuka means your brother-in-law. Fuka means your mouth. And dhu mal means a person of wealth. The last one, the focus is on dhu, not the last word. But dhu is generally attributed to something else. You won't just say dhu. Right? Dhu means somebody who owns something. So you'd have to clarify what it is. And there's a famous character in the Qur'an called Dhul Qarnayn, the one of the 2 horns, right? Or the person of the 2 centuries. Interesting character, right, who traveled from the east to the west, right, and meets up with. Right? He's mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf. Right? He's Dhul Qarnayn, the possessor of 2 horns. Right? So if I said Dhu Kitab, what would that be? Dhu Kitabin, the possessor of the book, right? But is it marfu' or not, is the question. So if it's dhu with a waw, it's marfu'. Right? If it's tha or the, right, then it will be something else. So I said, هذا الكتاب, this book, li ذي القرنين, is for ذي القرنين. You wouldn't say dhu because it's not marfu'. Because li makes the next word kasra. Right? Same thing. Okay? Same thing with abuka and akhuka and hamuka. Go ahead. You have to speak up, sorry. The mask. Yeah. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذِي الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Yeah. So the first one. Yeah. So the first one is وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Right? That's because it's a descriptive phrase, and the being of your Lord will, right, the possessor of all might and all honor and majesty will remain. Right? So wajhu, dhu, they match. They're both marfu'. Whereas in the end, tabarakasmu rabbika dhil jalali wa ikram. Blessed is the name of your Lord, rabbika with the kasra, dhil jalali wa ikram. So they match. The is makhfud and rabbi is makhfud. They have to match because they're descriptive phrases. They have to match in the mawsuf sifa. Exactly. Right, so abuka, if it wasn't marfu', say, I saw your father. Ra'aytu abaka. It would be an alif, not a waw. Right? Shakara abuka. Your father was grateful. Right? Like we said, shakara ashakiruna. The grateful ones are grateful. Right? Shakara al-muslimuna. So that would be with waw, as well as shakara abuka. Your father was grateful. Right? Shakara akhuka. Your brother was grateful. Hada hamuka. This is your brother-in-law. Yeah, brother-in-law. Right? That would be the predicate. The predicate is always marfu'. Right? Hamuka, as opposed to hamaka. Fuka is a really cool word. It means your mouth. It was famuka, but again, they liked eloquence and fluidity. So fuka. If fuka is makhfud, it becomes fika. So there's a prophetic narration where he says that you get charity for putting a morsel of food in the mouth of your wife. And it says fi imra'atik. Right, in the fi of your imra'at. Fi meaning, right, this word. Right. If it's fu, it's marfu'. If it's not, don't worry about it because we didn't get there yet. So these 5 words, you can tell by the waw. Just to chart them out here. Right, they're on your slides. Right, the unbroken plural is muslimuna. You can see the waw there. Right, these ones, abuka, akhuka, hamuka, fuka, and dhu mal. Right, you can see the waw. Right, had they been all mansub, it would be abaka, akhaka, hamaka, faka, and dha mal. Right, or if they're makhfud, abika, akhika, hamika, fika, and dhi mal. I want to just quickly hurry a little bit. As for the alif, it's a sign for rafa only in dual nouns. That's it. We talked about that. Right? Rajulani, kitabani. You just add the ani at the end. That makes it dual, and that's a sign that it's marfu'. Right? If it was mansub or makhfud, it would be aini, not ani. Right? Kitabaini. Ra'aytu rajulaini. I saw 2 men. Object. Hadani kitabani. These are 2 books. Right? Both. Right? They are the predicates. Predicates are always. The noon. This is just what we've already discussed. Right? The noon. Right? As for the noon, it is a substitute for the Dhamma. It's a sign of the rafa in mudari' verbs when they have the following attached to the end. So if we look up here as well, you can see them. Right? If they're dual, the dual ones, right? The second one down on each one of these are dual. So each third, you can see they're blocked off by threes, right? CD Jacob, you might want to zoom here, right? I sectioned them off by threes, right? So the first three, the second three, the third three, the fourth three. The middle one of all of them is ani. That's a dual. Right, so first one will be third person masculine dual, yaf'alani, those two men are doing. The second one will be third person feminine, right, taf'alani. Then, right, second person masculine, you two men are doing. And then second person feminine, you two women are doing. Both, right, they end in ani. So that noon remains. If the noon remains, it's marfu'. If it falls off, it's not. Okay. If they're plural, you'll see they end in una. Right. The third one down on the top two, left and right side, yaf'aluna and taf'aluna. Right. Those men, three or more men are doing, or you three or more men are doing. And then the last one is the second person feminine, right, plural, taf'alina. You one woman are doing. That noon remains. If it was not marfu', the noon would fall off. Right? Lan taf'ali. Right? Lan taf'ali. Or lam taf'ali. So, right, so this is just the same thing, just charted out. You can keep the chart once and just signify. Right, so that's about rafa'. Rafa' is one of the types of inflection generally shown by a Dhamma. Right? In certain situations, the substitute of the Dhamma will show and not the Dhamma itself. Right? So if the Dhamma shows, either you'll see it directly written, like dakhala Zaydun, right? Or it'll be implied because the word doesn't allow it. Dakhala Musa. Right? So Musa is the doer. Right? But you won't be able to see the Dhamma. There's nowhere to put it. You can't say Musa, right? It would be too hard. Right? If the Dhamma is not used, right, then it'll either be substituted by a waw, which would be in the case of the masculine unbroken plural, muslimuna, or the five nouns, abuka, akhuka, hamuka, fuka, dhu, ma'al. Right? The alif would be a substitute for the Dhamma when it's dual. Right? Rajulani, kitabani, sahirani. Right? And the noon, meaning the noon remaining and not falling off, it only applies to the mudari' verbs. Right? That would be a substitute for the Dhamma. Right? In those ones that have noun, that have the noons, right? Except for this one, the feminine, right? Plural. Yaf'alna and taf'alna. Besides those two. Everyone else that has a noon, that noon is a sign of a rafa', of marfu', if it remains. If it falls off, right, like in the verse we mentioned, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا. Those are not marfu'. Why? Because the noon is gone. The sign that it's not marfu' is that the noon is dropped off. So, any questions? That was a lot. Right? Lan taf'ali. The noon drops off. Only these two, this one, right, and the one across from it, taf'alna, right, the feminine plural, right, either third person or second person. That's the only noon that won't drop off if you put a lan or a lam in front of it. Yaf'alna and taf'alna. Right, so if I said lan taf'alna, right, you three or more women will never do it. The noon will still stay. Right, that word is mabni. It doesn't fall under the realm of i'rab. Right, it falls under the realm like the word men, liman. It doesn't change. That noon's stuck. Any other?
Could you go back to the slide showing the substitute slide?
The substitute for the noon?
Yeah.
Sure. This one or the one before? Yeah, so these noons, if they remain, that's a sign that it's marfu'. Because these are the ones that will fall off if it wasn't. Right, that's the two duals, second and third person. Right, the two plurals, second and third person again. Right, and the second person feminine singular. تفعلين, تكتبين. كتب means to write. So يكتبان, those two men are writing. يشكران, those two men are being grateful. So that's how the verbs conjugate. Any last questions?
If you were going to say this is your father, you said هذا أبوك, هذا أباك. Would it be nasab or would it be?
If you're
If you were going to say that this is your father.
This is your father. So this, anything that's on the left side of, this is just a trick in English. It works most of the time. Anything that's on the left side of is generally a subject. All subjects are marfu'. Anything that's on the right side of is, or any verb to be, right, is the predicate, and all predicates are marfu' as well. Right, so, Zaydun abuka. Zayd is your father. Right, Zaydun marfu', abuka marfu'. But if I said I saw your father, ra'aytu abaka. Right, so now abaka is the object, not the subject. Sure. Is that it?
Once you finish the homework for lesson 1, is there an answer key that we can check to just double check your answer?
I was hoping that everyone would hand it in, but I think that would be a good idea to do.
You want us to hand in homework? But
If it's already here. Yeah, the last two questions, there was a mistake. I didn't put the actual instructions. I'm dying to know what you guys did with it. Like, what is this? But if you guys have it, then you can pass it up. Yeah. The papers that we gave in the beginning, there's some exercise just to help you revise over the week and apply what we've done today. And then the vocab really was just an introduction of how to keep track of the terminology. Right, so you can add to it, you can amend it however is easier for your memorization. Right, but embrace the Arabic terms. They'll be your friends in the future. Right. If you have anything that is an Arabic text that has the vowels already written, right, even though vowels can be a crutch in the future, but for now it'll be a good idea, right, to read and search. Okay, this is, there's a Dhamma, there's a wow here, there's an alif. Find out the words that are marfu'. Find them. On the previous assignments there was 2 paragraphs. Right? If you want to keep that last page, you can, right? And you want to just pick out which ones are marfu', that would help. Right? That would be beneficial. But any text, whether it's the Qur'an or, right, if you see, right, add to your devotional reading, right, the eye of grammar. Inspect. Why is it lillahi and not lillahu or lillaha? Why is it alhamdu? Right? Why is it marfu'? Right, the why we'll explain more in the upcoming classes. Tamam. If there's any last questions, if not, then we'll finish inshallah. الفاتحة الله يقبلنا ويصلح شؤوننا كلها ويبارك علينا وعلى جميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات وجعل هذا سبب لإدخال السرور على قلب نبيك الكريم وتفريجا للمسلمين وهداية المسلمين وغير المسلمين بصفات إلى حضرة النبي. الفاتحة. تمام. جزاكم الله خيرا. If anyone wants to take a picture of this, it's kind of messed up. We'll try to have something printed for the upcoming class. This is the mudari'. We left out the past tense because it doesn't change much. Past tense are mabni. They are not mu'rab. They don't have inflections.